Hi everyone, and welcome back to Iron Destiny Props. This is a showcase of two Roman MPP flash guns assembled to replicate Darth Vader's iconic lightsaber in the film Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. Brent Burton, a collector based out of the UK, contacted me to build this hilt for him, and Jonathan Gibson reached out to me to assemble this one after he and his family sustained a direct hit from the Cat 5 Hurricane Michael. He was planning on submitting his Darth Vader costume to the Florida garrison of the 501st Legion, but his lightsaber was wrecked and a portion of his costume was lost due to the storm, so I'm especially pleased to present this one to him. On the outset of these builds, it was our goal, particularly with Jonathan's hilt, to achieve an elite standard of screen accuracy, so we went with Roman's MPP flash guns for the base. And when they arrived, I weathered up the tubes with all these scratches and nicks to replicate a well-worn vintage. Thanks to two previous builds I did for Dust and Colgrove, I was able to see what natural weathering looks like on real MPP flashes, and so I imitated that on these ones. Starting at the top, I'd like to thank Juan Fernandez and Ted Herman for kindly providing these WannaWanga steel-cast shrouds. They are from Roy's first run, which he had made from his reverse-engineered model based on the reference photos of the original hilt, so these are highly accurate to the real shroud. Roy has recently announced he will be offering a second run with minor modifications to the placement of these holes, I believe, and a slightly wider inner diameter so it can fit other vendor MPP hilts more easily, so keep a weather eye out for that. When these shrouds arrived to me, I tried weathering the existing paint, but I just wasn't satisfied with how the results were turning out, so I stripped them and then repainted them with proper wrinkle paint. But in doing this, I wanted to avoid the more pronounced typical wrinkle finish and tried to aim for a worn-down, subtle wrinkle which is present on the original shroud. And you'll notice on both of these I elected not to weather them with the slightly rusted look. If you examine the reference photos of the hilt during filming, the shroud paint is chipping away like you see here, but it isn't rusting yet. However, by the time Stephen Lane obtained the prop, the shroud was already rusting, so that detail in addition to the screws in the grips is technically a post-production mod. I'd like to thank Rob from Lightsabers for machining the bore wider on this shroud. Due to this particular Roman hilt having a slightly wider outer diameter, Rob had to remove a little less than a 32nd of an inch off the inside of the shroud, and it fits perfectly now, so thank you, Rob, for fitting me into your busy schedule so quickly and for your excellent service. If any of you need work done on your hilts, I highly recommend him. Since we were aiming for a high level of screen accuracy with these hilts, I suggested to Brent and Jonathan that we install these vintage Heiland bulb sockets. They function and are designed very similarly to a vintage MPP bulb socket, and they feature that distinctive coiled spring inside the emitter. In order to make the sockets more screen accurate, I disassembled them and dulled the excessively shiny contact you see there. I expanded the overly compressed spring and drilled for these two shroud screws. All these drive heads are oriented to match the Stephen Lane hilt, and the center here on the bulb release is wrinkle painted to match a vintage. From an aesthetic standpoint, the Heiland socket and steel shroud really help to convey a much more accurate quality of weight in the hand. When you get a Roman MPP, it comes with a solid resin dummy socket and chrome shroud that houses the coiled spring, and together they add a considerable amount of weight towards the end. So the Heiland socket really helps to cut down on that excess weight and offers a sense of realism with the sound of the bulb release shield. As you can see, the socket ports aren't perfectly aligned with the flash gun, but they're close enough to where you can still install the wires. Roy updated the blue and white not too long ago to be more accurate in their gauge and color, and while the gray and brown over here are roughly the right colors, their gauge may be just slightly too large, but in the reference photos, you can definitely see they take up the entire width of the port, so they're reasonably the correct size. Since we don't have good photo references of the clamp during filming, I decided to go with post-production weathering. Really, the only good photo we have of the clamp is the one of Vader standing in the carbon freezing chamber, and you can identify these 3 chips right here, but other than that, it's tough to see. So I took my time, and every scratch and chip you see here are what is present on the original prop as it exists today. Based on the photo references of the prop when it was displayed at the Hollywood Casino in Pennsylvania, I turned this clamp bar backwards so the flat side faces out, and angled this pin down to the accurate 5 o'clock position. The only difference between these clamps is Jonathan went with a real Exactra bubble strip and a real blue PCB, but for Brent, we went with a replica PCB from Slothfurnace and an accurate replica bubble strip from Props Plus on eBay. From what I've seen, this bubble strip is almost as good as a Rebel Scum. I don't have one of Phillips on hand, but compared to this vintage, the plastic on this one is much more pliable and slightly yellowish and a bit more opaque, whereas the vintage over here has a clearer, stiffer plastic and crisper magnification. You can see here I milled the flat deck of the strips down on both sides so they could accurately fit under the clamp rails, and I bent the clamp uprights inwards so they could grip the bubbles. And these are Todd's Costumes weathered T-track grips, with one longer grip that extends in between the clamp sleeve. Well, thank you, Brent and Jonathan, for these commissions. It's been a real labor of love putting these twin weathered MPPs together, and I look forward to getting them shipped out to you both. If any of you watching have an interest in a Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader lightsaber hilt, feel free to contact me on my Facebook business page or email me at irondestinyprops@yahoo.com. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.